Okay, great. How many people here were not at my last panel at 11:30? Anybody? One person, two people, okay. I got some feedback that it was wrong for me to spend 35 of the 45 minutes talking about myself. So I'm going to cut it down to 30 minutes. Okay, no one's laughing. I guess I used all my jokes this morning. Okay, I'm going to dive in. And thank you all for being here. So let's close the door. Okay. So for those of you that don't know, I'm a mental health and economic development educator through entertainment and technology. I have been focused on using technology, media, and anything else I can to help every one of us use and realize the full brilliance, the power, capacity we have in service to our lives and humanity itself. I'm also a venture catalyst and capitalist. I've invested personally, but I've helped start 49 companies that have issued stock and raised money about 25 times. Compared to some of the folks on the team here, I've only raised about 40 million, so I'm a babe in the woods. But I've been very involved in the four of the biggest industries that are out there. AI, I've been involved since '89. AR, VR, some of you know I worked on the Lawnmower Man. I've been involved in edge and distributed computing as well. And over the last 18 months, I had quite a ride in the blockchain crypto world. I have been holding off on cannabis because I'm a public figure, and although I have ownership in some companies, et cetera, et cetera. But when the Farm Bill came, I realized that it was time to really dive in, because I made the realization that I have probably 60 friends in the business across the entire value chain that are all decision makers and with some of the largest players in the business. So I then thought, what can I do to add value? I will create an ecology between finance, technology, education, and all the attributes that you already are familiar with. And mostly what I'm focusing on is how to get to the point where we have product that's trustable, clean, high quality, and it's not made out of paint thinner, which is one of the stories I heard about a few minutes ago. 3 drops of CBDs in paint thinner sold as cannabis in Nevada about 2 years ago, and they couldn't arrest the person because he couldn't do it federally because the laws don't permit it. And anyway, that's why we're here today, trying to figure out how to transition from a cowboy marketplace, from a rogue marketplace to a recreational marketplace, to a nutraceutical marketplace, to a medical marketplace. We have a number of very distinguished speakers today, and typically what I do with my panel is I try to go as quickly as I can to go through introductions. I have my audience introduce themselves first. I then have my audience members share 3 to 5 trends that they've observed since our last meeting together, and then as quickly as I can, I get us into conversation with you in the audience, because there's no value just to hear things. Maybe you'll get 1 or 2 epiphanies, but if you share your questions that are dominating your mind and the 4 to 6 issues you have in your mind at any given time, then you really learn and you move forward faster. So on that note, Julie, I'd like you to introduce yourself again.
Thank you.
That applause was from this morning, by the way. It's a leftover. Okay, thank you, though.
Hi, everyone. My name is Julie Rocky. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Cannabis Labs. We are a research and development intellectual property house, so we develop innovative cannabis products in different product categories and then license that IP and branding out to one state manufacturer exclusively. I joined the company about 1.5 years ago, coming from a little over 10 years in pharmaceuticals and biotech, working in specialty therapeutic areas and go-to-market plans and launches, and started to see a little bit of the research going on in cannabis, also naturally becoming very dismayed in pharmaceuticals, and really excited to join the industry and be part of it and just see where it's been taking off, the momentum that we have. Since the last time we met in October, it's just even from then grown leaps and bounds. So excited to sit on this panel with all these wonderfully distinguished individuals and be speaking with you guys here today.
By the way, I just want you to know that the people that are most powerful in this business are those that have had a transitional experience themselves. Julie started taking CBDs 3 years ago. She's older than me. And I just want you to know that nothing speaks louder than personal benefit. But Julie, I'm so happy you're here. Thank you so much. Dr. Sue.
Sure. Sue Sisley. I'm a physician based in Arizona. I practice internal medicine, and I'm also the president of Scottsdale Research Institute, where we conduct clinical trials, FDA-controlled trials, looking at smoked and vaporized cannabis flower only. So we don't study extracts or concentrates, just the dry bud material, trying to put flower through the entire FDA drug development process. And we just completed an FDA phase 2 trial looking at cannabis for treating military veterans with PTSD. That's the study we're probably best known for, but we also do a variety of other trials. We just published a study that we'd done with the University of Michigan looking at cannabis as a substitution for opioids. We're starting a new study now looking at, it's an FDA phase 3 trial, looking at smoked cannabis flower for treating advanced cancer patients, so terminally ill cancer patients with who have severe breakthrough pain using smoked flower. So eager to see flower get on the market with an FDA indication and force insurance companies to have to pay for flower.
So you heard the lunch today, and you heard our earlier panel today, somewhat demonizing the FDA. What's the other side of the FDA, the good side?
Oh, the good side is that they are not law enforcement. They're actually physician investigators who are eager to see cannabis, especially flower, put through the entire FDA drug development process. They've been working collaboratively with us for over 10 years. So I think the people who say that they're blocking the research are not aware. They're maybe not really in the trenches with the FDA like we are. We deal with them regularly, and they've been very cooperative and eager to see the data. And they just say, look, if you can show safety and efficacy of flower or other derivatives, then you can get through all the FDA process. But they require data from controlled trials, and that's what keeps frustrating people, is these controlled trials cost millions of dollars, and most companies aren't willing to invest in that yet.
I said data this morning. Data is really what we need, measurable results. Now, sitting next to Dr. Sue is Keith Spears. This is a beautiful sequence because Keith has been in the finance world all of his life. We're very good friends, full disclosure. Keith has raised $47 billion in his life, and he said to me the other day, who knew I would ever be in hemp or cannabis? But Keith, he and his partners created 120,000 jobs in the United States with his last big fund, a $500 million fund, and now they're doing the same thing in cannabis and hemp with Skytree Capital. Why don't you introduce yourself, Keith?
Thanks very much, David. My name is Keith Spears. I'm just very happy to be here to talk to everyone about what we're doing from an investment perspective. I think we come at the opportunity with cannabis more from a social impact perspective than a purely profit-driven perspective. So I think Skytree Capital Partners is raising its second fund, $200 million. And we're looking at opportunities that have the efficacy that we've been talking about on this panel, but also that are going to create jobs, try to create opportunities for minorities and women. It's some of the things that we're very passionate about. We fundamentally believe that you can generate great returns and also have a tremendous impact, that you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. And so that's how we come at the opportunity to invest in the cannabis space. We view it as the ultimate social impact investment opportunity. That's what attracts me to it. That's why I'm here and very excited to be here.
And Keith, like myself, has dedicated himself completely for the rest of his life to social impact long ago for both of us. And it's very easy to see why CBD medicines, hemp, et cetera, are very socially impactful. Speaking of social impact and veterans, it's my brother, Boone Cutler. Boone is a person who would be on the other side of that data I usually tell your story, but Boone, why don't you just tell your story a little bit briefly?
Yeah, my story is, hi everybody, my name is Boone Cutler. I served in Iraq in 2005, 2006. I was injured during a mortar attack on our base. I finished my tour, but I also spent 2 years at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. And during those 2 years at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, I learned all about the dope game. I learned all about the pharma game. I did it all, I took it all, not just opiates, but the psych meds, the sleep meds, chlorohydrate, whatever category you want to put that into, I did it all. And what started the whole cascade, that downhill slide for me, was my first dose of Seroquel. At Walter Reed, they used medication as a chemical prison for us because there were just simply too many wounded for the amount of people and the amount of care that was available. So a lot of us got on that combat cocktail. A lot of us got on what we call the zombie dope. And I spent a number of years on the zombie dope until a young man said to me, until I refused to take it anymore. And I put myself in the VA hospital into a lockdown facility, and I said, I'm not taking the medication anymore. They said, you have to, you're going to go crazy. I said, hey, the door's locked, let's go crazy. And that's really how it went. It just kind of went hardcore, and I went against medical advice to come off of the medications. After 17 days being locked down, I was off all of the medications, but I still could not sleep. I went to work, and this young kid came up to me and said, hey, what's wrong with you? You look like hell. And I said, hey, thanks a lot, but I can't sleep. And he said, dude, why don't you just smoke pot? And I was so offended by the guy, I literally just chastised him and dismissed him. And then that night, after going through the 17 days, after being on the dope for about 4 or 5 years at that time, I'm laying in bed and I thought to myself, I have done everything medical science has to offer. I've watched the sun come up in the morning, I watched it go down at night, I've tried to reset my circadian rhythm, I've done everything, every drug, every modality, anything anybody ever had to offer to help people get sleep, I tried over several years. None of them worked. I smoked marijuana, I slept for 5 hours. 5 hours. No nightmares, no problems, no hallucinations, nothing, which I was accustomed to at that time. And before cannabis, I was taking all the medications they were giving me, plus a good amount of scotch and about half a bottle of NyQuil. That was my daily routine to go to sleep. I've spoke before Congress on these issues. When I first started using cannabis in 2010, nobody in my community would talk about it. Now everybody in my community talks about it because we don't want to be on the zombie dope. We don't want to be on the painkillers. We don't want to be on the opiates. My kidneys got blown out from opiates, which was a contributing factor to a heart condition I had this last year. All these things are happening. Our people are dying because they're being poisoned. Cannabis does not do that. It's safer than grapes, and that's what I tell people because it's a fact. More people died from grapes than cannabis. This is ridiculous. We're not talking Cheech and Chong. We're talking about people getting help. Currently, I work in media. I also have a CBD company. I launched Warfighter Hemp a couple years ago. It did very well. Recently, currently we're launching Verve. It's a new CBD company, but we're also going to be focusing, you were talking about trends, David. I think everybody already knows it, but nobody's talking about it because you all think it's a big secret. It's not. It's just a big secret to everybody who is everybody, and that is the proliferation of other cannabinoids. Not just THC and CBD, but CBN and CBG. CBG, we can start replacing a lot more psych meds. CBN, we can get rid of Ambience, Trazodone, and all of these. So I'm really here to talk, to let you know I'm here to help. I'm looking for people to align with. I'm looking for people to coalesce with to push this thing forward. My community needs cannabis. We need it in the VA system. We need to find a way to stop having to come out of pocket. CBD is expensive. A lot of warfighters can't afford it. They're staying on the zombie dope just because of finances, and it's ridiculous. I'm trying to help change that. My name is Boone Cutler. Thank you for having me, David.
Matthew, Victor, Boone, very articulate. Have you ever considered radio or something?
Yeah, I should do that, huh? I should do that.
Tell them what you do on the radio side.
This last year I went through a cardiac issue. I had to go down to Panama, get stem cells. Once again, the medical industrial complex in the United States really didn't help me out a whole lot. And stem cells are a new thing, but I went down to Panama, I got stem cells. I no longer have cardiomyopathy, heart failure, polycythemia. I'm pretty sure my Parkinson's is gone too. All of these things are secondary to the blast injury I sustained in Iraq. I work in media. I have a show called Tipping Point with Boone Cutler, The Warfighter Perspective. It ran for several years, but since my health over the last couple of years, I had to get rid of the show, but the show's coming back. I'm not sure exactly what station we're going to be on, but it's going to be, we're being courted right now by some pretty big industries.
Matthew, you get inundated every week, probably every day, with all these opportunities. You have your own filter that you're looking for in terms of impact that you want to have. How do you filter through all the deal flow to move forward the sliders of research, trust, and impact in the cannabis world? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you, David. Hey, Matt Norgren, founder, CEO of a fund called Arcadian, also a capital management business that Arcadian has, and a series of SPVs. We've been investing for many years and have learned quite a few things along that journey, and one of them is how important management is, and that obviously is important in any category, but in particular to cannabis. There's a lot of misinformation out there and a lot of excitement with not a lot of regulation. So, management's really important to us, David, I would say. Also, we're really a growth round investor. So, for us to have a qualifying investment opportunity, it needs to have a couple of rounds of financing already in place and a year or two of revenue. So that's helpful as well when you're a little bit later stage investor. But glad to be here today. Boone, thank you for your service, man. These stories are why we're all in this business outside of the economic return. We just can't tell you, how moving those things are, and you're in the right community, right? Because if you're asking for support, never been in an industry that gives more support than cannabis. So we're happy to help you, and at Arcadian we believe in collaboration. So please feel free to reach out to us with any questions, and we're here to be of service.
By the way, Steve, you're an athlete by background, if I remember. Not Steve, but Matthew. That's an industry that's equally plagued and benefits by bad drugs and good CBDs. Does your experience as an athlete color what you've done? I mean, does it inform the decisions you make?
It certainly does, especially as a backup quarterback who never started a game in college or in my NFL career. You learn pretty quickly what it means to be in a servant leadership position, and have taken that philosophy into investment, because I think we can join great teams and help make them better, but we understand what it means to be a team. Cannabis is very diverse, our team's diverse, our way of thinking is diverse, and I think if we continue to collaborate and operate in a team mentality, much like what sports does and service does, I think we're going to be stronger together.
Thank you, that's great. I can imagine weaving a team out of all the characters in this business ecology of ours. It's definitely worthy of television, as every producer in Hollywood knows these days. Speaking of ethical business, Steve, I noticed that you use the word ethical cannabis in your bio. I love that, because the word at the top of the pyramid for everybody is trust. Everything we're talking about is about trust. Tell me where ethics, trust have played into you creating your interesting business.
Yeah, so first I'd like to acknowledge the panelists. We have a pretty amazing group of people here, and really it's people like this that make us excited about coming to work every day. And our company's mission is to help bring trust and transparency to the cannabis industry. And in a way, we didn't need to bring it. There's a lot of great things happening, but it was sort of behind the curtain for a very long time. And what we want to try to do is help bring that out into the light, to quote somebody very famous. And so what we do is we provide software to the cannabis industry. About half of all the cannabis produced in the US legally every month goes through our platform. And we primarily provide lab testing software. So all of that cannabis inventory that's produced, whether it's flower or concentrates, ready for consumption, or higher up in the supply chain, used for ingredients, all of that is lab tested, and it allows us to give that information back to the community in a way that they can see how all these cannabinoids and terpenes express themselves across these products, and so that people can find what they actually need. Cannabis is a very complicated product. It's not one size fits all for everybody. Some people have different reasons for consuming it. So that's something that we want to help bring to the community. And one thing that we love about this industry is the community itself. So our mission is to help bring trust and transparency to the cannabis industry, like I said, and help every ethical cannabis business thrive. We didn't put the word legal in there, we put the word ethical in there because we get a really rare chance to help shape the way this future industry is built, and we can shape it in a way that helps all ethical businesses rather than just a few big money players at the top or kind of the old guard coming in from other industries.
Want to give us a one-liner on what Confident is?
The one-liner, yeah. So we provide software to cannabis operators to help them test and sell and buy. So we're a B2B wholesale marketplace. A good analogy might be Auto Trader plus Carfax for cannabis.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank all of you. Now I'm gonna get us to conversation as quickly as we can. I've asked each of my folks here to come up with a couple trends that they've observed in the last 6 months. Things are moving so quickly in this business that I'm sure that each will have a few. Go ahead.
Sure. So I'll speak to a little bit on the branding side. So we do B2B and B2C marketing. So on the B2B side, there's a lot, especially in Colorado, we've noticed with the major dispensaries like Native Roots and Live Well requiring a platform for their bud tenders to be fully trained on your product before they're stocked in shelves. So we've started to create bud tender training manuals, which essentially go through all of product information, product profile analogs, and then also key selling points around it. So it helps supplement the sales teams who are in there, but also just more from just an educational background. There's quite a bit of turnover from the bud tender perspective, so it keeps the education ongoing, and we're continuing to add to that. And we've used that now as a template for the other states that we enter in to continue to build upon the bud tender training perspective. I'm going to actually be working with a company that close to Mad Men, who's also developing more of a software program that will allow for that easy information exchange. So I think on the B2B side, we've seen a lot of information exchange and needed for the bud tender education. On the consumer side, much to Stephen's point around transparency and building trust, really a lot of the consumers that we see are really focused on what the core customer is looking at. And when I say core, meaning those influencers, early adopters, first movers, those individuals who are close to their follower base, if you will, who are the ones that are staying up to date on technology, processes, where products are manufactured, their source of origin, things of that nature, and they're educating their platform. So we are doing quite a bit of resource and investment in getting close to those individuals to help educate them on our brands, being fully transparent, where the ingredients that are sourced for our products are from, and allowing them to use their platform to educate their consumers. So I think we really are seeing a refocus back to that core rather than focusing on all the new consumers that are starting to come into the space, and that seems to be growing in the product categories that we're in.
Thank you. Dr. Sue,
Yeah.
I like saying that. It makes me feel like Johnny Cash. What are you seeing as innovation in this space? What are the trends you're seeing in terms of opportunities you have?
I would say, one of the things that is encouraging to me is that I'm seeing scientists getting a backbone and demanding that the government end the DEA monopoly. That is, I don't know, many of you probably are aware that every clinical trial in this country, we have to purchase cannabis from the federal government to conduct these controlled trials. And so every single study that you've seen since 1968 has been forced to purchase this very low-quality cannabis from the University of Mississippi. And we would argue that this has sabotaged studies for years. The outcomes of these efficacy trials are definitely harmed by this sort of moldy, diluted cannabis, and it doesn't come close to resembling anything here in California or any good quality flower. So I'm excited that finally scientists are, rearing up and demanding change. It hasn't moved the needle at all, unfortunately. The government is still enforcing this monopoly at University of Mississippi, and so we still only have one federally legal drug supply for any clinical trials in the U.S. But I'm hoping once we break this monopoly and force the DEA to license other growers for research, it will create a renaissance of cannabis research in the U.S., but I just worry how long this will take if we continue to languish with this low quality, this cannabis that has no genetic variety, doesn't, no diverse phenotypes. We are already years behind other countries who have multiple growers for research, and we may never catch up at this point.
Let me ask one other question. I know that the first patent for cannabis is owned by the government. I've also heard stories about the fellows that did that research and then went quiet. What are the implications of the government owning this patent, and when does it lapse? Do you have any idea?
I don't know when it lapses, and I haven't seen the government act on the patent at all, so we don't know. All these years that they've owned this, we've not seen them try to intervene. So, but it is curious that they saw, the patent basically was identifying cannabis as a neuroprotectant, and now we have really solid published scientific data that supports cannabis for neuroprotection, which is exactly why you're seeing the people in the NFL and other sports leagues who get concussions regularly demanding access to this, because they know that cannabis does play a role in neurogenesis. The veterans community is demanding access because they know that it is helping them recover from other neurologic conditions. So the government identified this early on. They secured this patent, but it hasn't blocked anything other than that we continue. The government, by creating this monopoly, they have systematically impeded cannabis research since 1968, and we have to, if we can, everybody in this room can come together and put all of our energy into pressuring the DEA to make, they pledged to the public 3 years ago on the Federal Register that they would license other growers for research, and they have not made good on that pledge, so we need to demand that.
Matthew, you made a gesture.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to, Sue, and you and I have talked about this for years. Did I just see something come out from the NFL that's...
Yeah, they made an announcement. The NFL said they're going to work with the NFLPA to create another pain commission. We already had a pain commission that was, that Eugene Monroe and others have been on for years, and it hasn't produced anything. We don't really need more commissions that produce nothing. We need action, and the NFL has a golden opportunity to do the right thing, and all the leagues do, but they're just stonewalling. So I'm hoping that by everybody being here today, we're doing a good job of building awareness and hopefully putting pressure on them.
Okay. Keith, you see a lot of deal flow. On your first test fund, you got a 72% IRR. Almost half of your companies went public. Now you're going 20 times bigger. What are you seeing in the world of innovation, disruption? What are the trends you're seeing?
I think the one thing that I would focus on today is less about innovation and more about collaboration. I think it's something that has been resonating on this panel. I think a lot of us are in this business because we want to make a difference in the world. And I think when we talk to potential investors, when we talk to companies, the notion of having impact at scale is something that really resonates with them. And so as we're having these conversations, the idea of putting together an ecosystem that can really have collaboration and impact domestically, internationally, is something that we're just seeing in large measure. And I think it's we're talking to people in China, people in Africa, Europe, wherever globally that are looking at the benefits of cannabis. And so we're very excited about that trend. And we want to leverage our relationships and our resources to help bring more of that collaboration to bear. We think that as we're talking to companies, it's important, as I think Matthew talked about, look at the management team, how successful have they been historically, but to the extent we can provide value add through our network and our relationships, we want to do that. And I think that's one of the things that we're very focused on. So we'd love to see how we can collaborate amongst everyone on the panel and everyone here as we kind of try to build this community that's already there. It's already vibrant and thriving, and it's going to become more institutional over time. That's inevitable. But we want to make sure it has a social conscience and a thought about being impactful in the right way, right? So it's been great having those kinds of conversations over the last few months, and just recognizing how that spirit is ingrained in this community. And so it's just great to be part of it.
Thank you, Keith. Boone, you and I started talking cannabis a couple of years ago. You had your finger to the pulse because it's so important to the veterans. What are you seeing now?
I see it's become more important to the warfighter community, specifically just because we want to be effective again, and we've lost faith in a lot of the normal or the everyday, again, medical industrial complex stuff. Unfortunately, the VA system is just overtaxed. Same thing as Walter Reed. It's about being able to manage a very high, big caseload with a lot of injuries. Some of the other stuff that I'm seeing that I think everybody should probably keep their eye on is not just cannabis to ingest, but we're also talking about creating carbon sinks now, where it will actually pull the carbon out of the air. The earth doesn't care how carbon gets there, it just cares that it goes away. And there's actually a way right now to determine how many vehicles are in an area and how much cannabis has to be planted in that area to zero out the carbon emissions. This is all possible with cannabis, so that's what we're talking about. You're talking about stuff that's coming down the pike. You're going to start seeing carbon sinks, S-I-N-K, not with a C, not sink, but sink, like it goes in the sink, goes down the drain. Carbon sinks is a big deal. Textiles, hempcrete. Don't be surprised if you start seeing a lot of buildings in the United States getting built with 3D printers and hempcrete, because that's going to happen. These are the new innovative things that are happening. Also to replenish soil. On a lot of our military bases, I know guys who are at Fort McClellan whose teeth are falling out, and this is from 10, 15, 20 years ago because the water table's been damaged and the land has been damaged. Well, we know that if you're planting cannabis, it will recondition the soil. It will pull all the bad stuff out and actually make it plantable again. So when we're talking about cannabis, we're not just talking about what we ingest for our own health. We're talking about what's in the air that screws up our health, what's in the ground that screws up our health. And cannabis is going to change all of that. As far as technology goes, crystalline nanocellulose. As far as technology goes, graphene. These things, as we replace fossil fuels, which we are doing right now, the world is doing, we're going to be looking at things like lithium ion. We're going to be looking at things that make different sources of energy, and some of these sources of energy will come from cannabis. That's the big game. It's not just about CBD under your tongue making you feel better, activating the endocannabinoid system, tapping that CB1, CB2 receptor. It's not just that. We're talking about truly changing the world. We're talking about changing the atmosphere, the climate change, reversing it, all of these things. Doc talked about CBD as a neuroprotectant. CBG is neurogenesis. The warfighter community wants neurogenesis. Professional sports, it's about bringing the brain back to to a level that's normal, that you can still have a good life, quality of life. I mean, look at people with Alzheimer's, same thing. CBG, again, gets rid of MRSA. I mean, how many people does MRSA kill? More people than AIDS. So when we're talking about what's coming down the pike, it's not just an ingestible, it's actually cleaning the world. And that's why I'm here.
I don't know if people know this, but I understand that hemp actually helps to reinvigorate the soil as well.
Yeah, exactly. That's why we should be using on military installations that have been poisoned.
Yeah. Matthew, you're in a beautiful position to see where things are going, because if you look from a meta perspective, you see where the trends are by the pitches you receive. What are you seeing these days?
As a side note, have you worked with Sue before?
We hung out.
She's got so much great research on veterans that I think it would be good for you two to engage. And we're lucky to have Sue in this industry, by the way. Trends we're seeing, I mean, we try to think about when a potential vertical or market might mature. And I think what you see with retail, cultivation, manufacturing, in terms of valuation on a multiple, that probably had its peak value in November, December, unfortunately, because a lot of Canadian bankers play a little bit of a different game up there, and you have those assets trading at 30 to 80 times revenue multiples, which is not realistic in that particular asset category. We think there's a lot of margin correction to happen there. Right now, you still get a little bit of that premium because the large multi-state operators are trying to sell a growth story, and they've got to keep stock high. But eventually, you're going to see that correct, and that's the reason you see companies like Cannabis that has $4.5 billion on their balance sheet. It's because they want cash to be able to put that to work and buy distressed assets. So I think we all need to be realistic when it comes to licensed businesses and the type of multiples and values those businesses can receive. And so I think there's a little bit of correction there. It's what I'm seeing. I'm also seeing on the ancillary side, if you're sort of in that B2B world, he has a fantastic company, by the way, in that category, which is where we spent most of our time investing. We have 16 investments in growth round companies in the B2B side of cannabis. I think that because those companies don't generate their revenue directly from a licensed activity, takes some level of risk away, not entirely, but enough where they have a little more access to public markets in the United States, for example, like NASDAQ. So you're going to see a lot of companies listing publicly in the United States, not having to go to Canada, a lot more liquidity, a lot more volume in terms of trading. So I think if you're a scaled, non-licensed company, it's a really interesting time the next 12 months to 18 months that you can exit at some type of, probably premium valuation. But I think that happens a little bit more quickly than we hope. I think if you're looking at investment opportunities 18 months to 36 months out, you've got to be thinking about the consumer aspect, brands and IP around potential plants and products and distribution, delivery, testing. That whole category is probably what we're seeing trend a little bit further out than the next 12 months as a peak valuation.
What are you seeing? I know that there are 17 different verticals. I mean, I'm just making that number up. There's a lot of verticals in the ecology. But what are you seeing as a multiple that makes sense these days, I suppose, on the cultivation side?
On the cultivation side, if you look outside the industry, what does a manufacturing company trade for or an agriculture company trade for? I mean, you're a 3 to 5 multiple.
So it's business as usual. I mean, that's a solid multiple based on revenues.
It's still a nice multiple, but in cannabis and hemp will always get a bit of a premium. But at some point in time, it starts to correct.
Got it.
I think, and you'll have high top shelf quality cannabis that's in a different category. But in terms of run of the mill, majority of the products, as he was talking about earlier, which Dr. Sue is not a fan of.
The ones that won't be here much longer.
Right. The whole plant medicine is fantastic, but unfortunately, a lot of the world can't receive it in that form. So if we can get it to them in as many forms as possible, you can still help somebody potentially achieve homeostasis internally, which is our ultimate goal. And any cannabinoid can potentially help that. So I think you're going to see a lot of isolated, infused in products until we can get the world to realize what Sue's work really means.
And thank you for honoring Sue. Let me just give her a hand for all the work that she's doing because I promise you there's not a person in the audience that won't agree with the following statement. We are all veterans. None of our lives are easy. And this will benefit everybody, the work you're doing. So, Steve, speaking of which, you're at an interesting vantage point because you're spanning the B2B world. You see a lot of activity. What are you seeing when it comes to your activities to bring quality control, ethics, and measurable efficacy to the business for the consumer?
Yeah, so for context, for those of you who don't know our company too well, so we're currently in, I think, about 24 states, not in every legal medical state yet. There are a few that we haven't entered in yet, but in many of the ones in which we do participate, we probably have maybe anywhere from 30 to 80, sometimes even 100% of the producers and processors in that state on our platform. So what we can very easily see based on the inventory that they're producing, the kinds of things they're producing, the volumes at which they're producing, we get to see a really kind of nice overview and bird's eye view of the whole industry. And it's been really interesting to see how things have changed so rapidly. So just as an example, in Oregon, you may have seen that they had this very big oversupply problem, and a lot of companies were going out of business, unfortunately. And it was because of what I fundamentally think is a good thing. It was very low barriers to entry. Anybody could get a license and operate, and that creates a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship. But inevitably, too many people enter the market, and there's just not enough demand. There are only 4 million people in Oregon, and a lot of companies go out of business. So that was a huge problem that happened, over the course of a year and a half. And just last weekend, we were in Oregon, and that whole thing has turned around. Great. So there's actually a shortage in Oregon right now, particularly with outdoor. Since when did Oregon suffer from a shortage of outdoor? And Oregon, like California, has some of the best cannabis in the world. So that's one data point in Oregon. Another completely opposite scenario is in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is barely getting started. A lot of licensees are barely opening. Much more concentrated model. Not quite as concentrated as, say, New York, but they have a shortage, right? There are plenty of states with shortages. And a lot of the businesses who struggled or are struggling, or just frankly, maintaining status as a small business, I think are going to see a big explosion on the West Coast when interstate commerce is finally an option. I'm not going to go on the record and say when that is, 5-7 years maybe, who knows, maybe hopefully sooner. But a lot of people like to talk about trends in the industry. It's impossible to talk about a market trend in aggregate. It's as if we're doing business in the Middle Ages. People have different currencies, different laws, different players, and it's just too all over the place. So you have to look at every market individually.
So I just have time for a few questions. What's your question, sir? No questions? Impossible. Who's got a question? Please.
Yes, I was supposed to be on that panel, but ran out of chairs.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That's true. You're on tomorrow at 11:30.
I am.
Okay, so go ahead. What would you have said, Bob?
The 507 patent on nerve protection, that expired the 25th of last month.
Wow.
That's 663-0507? Okay.
So what's your question? What are the implications of that?
Ran exactly 17 years to the day it expires. Now, nerve protectants, sourced naturally from cannabis, are open season. Anybody can apply to the FDA with a license.
That's amazing. That's great.
Two friends of mine are starting up a company for this lab.
So, any other? Thank you for
Thank
that.
you.
Any other?
Great
I see a question in the back. Hemp. That's your name, right? Hemp.
No, I'm with Veterans Health Solutions Personal Care. Cannabis is something else I'm doing with it. So I'm a veteran, combat veteran.
Thank you for your service.
Right on, brother.
The question is for Dr. Suseski. The report that you did for the 76 veterans, right? Where can we find that? So that we can have a simple way of communicating this to the veteran community that we work with, the urban community as well as the unserved areas, where most veterans are not even aware of what is truly going on. So we have access to that, if we do wake up and find it.
Yeah, you definitely will have access to all of the data once it's published. We just unblinded the data recently, and so we're analyzing thousands of statistical data points to try to build a manuscript, and we're going to be submitting to JAMA, hoping that they, some kind of really mainstream peer-reviewed medical journal will accept this material. So if JAMA rejects it, then we have to go, through peer review with another journal. So that's what will delay your ability to review this. But our commitment is to publish everything, the good and the bad of cannabis will all be put into the public domain, and that's different than Big Pharma, right? We're a nonprofit, so we insist on putting everything out there, but with Big Pharma, if the data didn't make their drug look favorable, you would never see those studies. So that's the good thing about nonprofit drug development research.
Last burning question, if there is one, please.
A number of you guys have talked about social impact, and I'm curious, specifically for Mr. Spears and Nordgren, on the investment side, on the fund side, are you finding that there is money that is holding cannabis companies to the expectation that they meet social impact within their business structure? Because we all hold ourselves to a particular standard within the industry to try to do better because we're starting
Socially responsible LPs.
Exactly right. So are you seeing money starting to gravitate towards companies that are building corporate social responsibility strategies into their business, or is that something that's starting to become an expectation from the money side?
I think there are investors who are very focused on that. We just had a great meeting this morning with a group that's coming together to build a fund of funds that's focused on impact investing in the cannabis space. And they're going to hold the companies, the funds, feet to the fire in terms of meeting those metrics. And I know that's something that we're focused on at Skytree, is that it's important to know what you're looking for in terms of these types of metrics, whether it's jobs, whether it's diversity, whatever the case may be. And then hold the company's feet to the fire, measure the performance, make sure they're hitting those targets. What are they doing to institute these changes, that type of thing. So we're very focused on it. A lot of the folks in our ecosystem are very focused on it. We think it gives us a somewhat of a competitive advantage as we go compete for business to invest in a company. It resonates with the management teams that we're talking to. We also manage a program with the City of Oakland where we help social equity entrepreneurs get licensed and get loans, microloans from the City of Oakland. So this is something that we're very committed to. It's in our DNA, and a lot of the people that we work with, it's the same way.
Matthew?
Yeah, I think that's very well said. And a couple of our new friends over here, we were talking about this topic last night. And if you ask somebody like Bruce Margolis in the back of the room, who's been doing this for 40-something years, hey, huh? 51, okay. There's been a lot of people fighting for us to get to where we are today. And I think all of us that are in the space need to be aware of the fact that we have a responsibility not only to the people that got us here, but those that have been affected along the way, and ultimately to build an industry the right way from the beginning. While everybody else out there is reverse engineering, trying to figure out how to care about female empowerment and how to care about the environment and how to minority, issues that exist. Cannabis can build them from the beginning. So I think it's kind of a cool responsibility we all have, but at the end of the day, we need to take that into the companies we're involved with, into our collaborative efforts in the space, and we'll be just fine. I mean, we still have a ways to go, but I do feel like this industry, and travel all over the world speaking like Sue, you do see a lot of positive responses when it comes to social impact, and I can promise you that's a big responsibility that we lay on our companies, and I think we represent that. Stacy on my team's here. Our team's very diverse because we feel like it takes a diverse group of thinkers to make an investment in a cannabis company that needs to think that same way.
To close, this morning there were a number of profound statements. Most of you heard them. The one that was most profound to me on the investing side was that if you really want to invest in this business, invest in a fund, because you have professionals. They're doing all the due diligence, and it may cost you a little teeny bit, but it will greatly diminish the chance of yourselves getting compromised in a bad way. And the fund that Keith was referring to is a fund of funds run by women called Earth Capital Advisors, LLC in Los Angeles. Their specific mission is to raise a significant amount of money they can put into other funds that are values aligned, so they can ensure that the values alignment is there against the onslaught that is inevitably incoming from those that care less about values. Thank you very much for today.